We're going to be joined by Ann Morrison in a moment with her amazing blog, TWILAND.INFO, and I really appreciate you donating to her. We don't have any charges for access to all our amazing information. We also produce videos. Probably produce one today right after the show, and if not, then tomorrow, the day before Christmas. This information, of course, is valuable because you're not going to find it elsewhere on any other websites, including many other websites on YouTube, the Alex Jones Show, Rents Network. You're not going to find this information anywhere to the level of scientific validity, references, and actual sites, recommended pictures, videos, etc. This is unique, and it's all available for you free. I want to do a couple of announcements. The first one is I'm very proud to say that we have now our Amazon, Nutrimedical Amazon store up. And here's how it works. If you go to the page called a product page at Nutrimedical, and you hit that product page button at the top left-hand side, it says Dr. Bill Deagle News and then Products, and you hit the product button, you'll see a selected companies. And what you do is scroll down until you reach what's called where did Michelle put it now? I think she's moved things around a little bit. It's called Nutrimedical. Let's see, where's that page? It's the Nutrimedical store. Here it is. Amazon Nutrimedical store is what she has as a title. And when you go to that link, you're going to directly see a list of called Browse by Categories. Now, it doesn't list all the categories. If you hit the bottom category, what you're going to find is that bottom category, for example, sports athletics. So you see sinus care, dental periodontal care, nutraceuticals. Under nutraceuticals, you'll see a list of nutraceuticals there that we don't carry that I think are very useful, and many in combination. One of the top ones I have listed there at the very top is called Beet VO2 Max. I've researched this is the most powerful of all of the beet juice powders available in the world, and I really strongly recommend you take it with our Cardiovasc and Supernox to increase nitric oxide for mitochondrial function. We have other mitochondrial function support. Our CoQ10 Supreme is the only non-crystallizing CoQ10 in the world, non-polymerizing. We have the best and most absorbing form of the reserve form, CoQ10 ubiquinol, the most powerful form of carnitine called propionyl L-carnitine. We have mitochondrial catalyst or mitochondrial energy. We have D-ribose powder, and we have NADH tablets. So we have all of these for mitochondria. This is another essential addition. So you can test. We'll be putting up also the test strips called the Berkeley test strips from a company in Switzerland. These can test your nitric oxide production. It's extremely important if you're trying to reverse hypertension and getting your blood vessels to work again, that you do that. We also have had requests, although we have a great red greens drink, we also, people have asked specifically for a green superfood, and this is the one I select. We also have basically the Brain Mag and Calm Mind. We can add additionally the Calmade, which is a valerian extract gel. Those are very helpful. And we have, of course, our Minerals Plus, some lithium orotate, but people with mood disorders, manic depressive can add some additional lithium orotate, and this is my recommendation. And you'll see page 1, page 2 of the nutraceuticals there. You can look at, for example, sinus care. We include the Sinupulse Elite, the Sinupulse Elite tablets, and of course, welcome back, Ann. It's great to have you here.
Yeah, it's good to hear you too, and Merry Happy Holidays.
Yeah, I was just announcing that we just launched our Amazon Nutrimedical page. So there are particular products like technology, like for sinuses and specific technology, is available now and sponsored, and these ones that I select. So I also don't recommend that you wander off and go to other products on Amazon other than the ones I recommend, because you're going to get into a minefield of things that I don't think are top-notch. And rather than us trying to private label or custom make some of these, some of them are such high quality, I tell people you can take these few things or technology like the Sinupulse, which we actually helped launch a decade ago with the ENT doctor out of Oklahoma, and when it became so popular it was in pretty well every pharmacy. We actually helped to also launch the MyPillow many years ago. So MyPillow, before it became nationally and internationally famous, we were one of the main launch points for MyPillow. So, and let's get into your blog, because we've got a lot of information to cover. I don't know if you have time today for us to do our video, but it would be wonderful to do that. You got a lot of hits on YouTube and Vimeo. We have some other video platforms. We're going to be putting it up on our Deagle Network platform now, which we put it on many other video platforms in the world. And we also have what's called minds.com, which is another platform. We're posting it up as well. So this just started this week. What topics do you want to cover today?
Well, we have, you are going to be astonished. Oh, second, I've got to
I can hear some
turn
sound
this
coming.
off.
Sound coming through, yeah.
You have a background noise. There we go. Sorry about that.
Sounds like maybe us talking on the radio.
It was us, yeah.
I know that voice sounded familiar. I think it was me.
Yes, it was. I have some astonishing news.
Right.
Astonishing, and it has to do with with space and also with the core of the Earth. But before we go into that, I would like to catch up on Zika.
Right.
And so Zika, the CDC has allocated $184 million to states, territories, local governments, and universities. They got $350 million.
Right.
And so half of it they're giving out to to not the federal government, but to other government entities, health entities. And in addition, the half they're keeping, they are going to send emergency response teams to states with Zika outbreaks. Yeah. They are going to improve laboratory testing capacity. And when they said in Florida that they wanted all the pregnant women to go and get tested for Zika, well, they didn't have the test kits, and so there was a delay. And then they said, well, just the priority women, the ones that are in the last terms. And so they really, and then when they got the tests in to the CDC, the laboratories couldn't test them. They were like a month behind. In
other words, they couldn't handle the volume, is what you're saying.
They couldn't handle the volume.
Right.
So, and then they said they're going to provide a framework for tracking pregnancies and births affected by Zika.
Well, why would they even put the test out if you don't have a data structure or an algorithm of why you're going to develop the data? That doesn't make sense. Right?
Exactly. And they kept complaining that they didn't have the money. But, they had the money for Ebola to track the people that came back from Ebola endemic areas, countries. And what they would do is they'd stop them at the airport. They'd get their home address or their home, county, and contact the public health at that county and say, track this person.
Right.
We want to know if he gets sick in the next 2 months. And so they had that already in place, and they did not do it for people who were coming back from Zika endemic areas. And
really?
We know that, no, they didn't. They had 5 airports that had 90% of the travelers that went to West Africa.
So the airport could simply, as people came in, notify the local public health people to start a tracking system to track these people and even get their phone numbers and call them and maybe their email address and make sure that they knew what the status is, what they felt like, even emailing them and calling them and saying, hey, did you get your test done? Here's the results of your test. Come in to see your doctor, one of our public health doctors. That's pretty sloppy, isn't it?
Oh, it's extremely sloppy. I've complained about this since Zika came on the radar.
We're calling them on Matt, and you're not going to see, of course, government employees do this because they lose their job. You're not going to see universities because they don't want to be embarrassed that they're embarrassing their colleagues, because they often rotate back and forth from industry or government or university positions, so they're not going to say anything either. Right?
Well, and they're not providing a framework for tracking men, only pregnancies and births. And so, it's the men that give it to the women and vice versa. And, this it's not complete.
Right.
It's treating Zika as though it were the flu or something.
Yeah. Zika is what I call an extinction level event, genetic plague. It's the kind of thing that can end civilization as we know it. There's a movie, remember, out about a dozen years ago, and it had a British actor in it, and the whole theme of the story was that the youngest person, the last person born, died. And everybody on Earth mourned because basically everybody became functionally sterile. No one could have babies anywhere on Earth. And when the youngest person died, the mourning and the violence that broke out and the craziness was mind-boggling. And people don't get it, that, these kinds of things are actually happening now. This isn't a full sterility, but in many of the endemic areas, having a baby now is a dangerous thing. And even when the Vatican comes out and gives an absolution to say, hey, don't worry, we're going to give you an absolution for an abortion, this is pretty serious, isn't it? Because the baby's not born with a brain. You don't have a full person there. You almost have a body, if it wasn't infected with virus, that could be a source for organ transplant if it wasn't something infected. Yeah.
Oh yeah, this is.
I can hear a voice in the background. I don't know if it's an open mic at the studio or if it's something there here. It's gone now. Okay, go ahead, Ann. So that's pretty serious. Okay, what's the next topic?
And $25 million will be awarded to 21 communities at greatest risk for Zika infection. So that's going to be New York City, Miami, Florida, and Texas, the town Brownsville, Texas. But they don't know the 21 communities at greatest risk because they haven't been tracking where the travelers have been going. And we know that Zika can be passed not only through sexual relations, but also by saliva, by spit, by tears.
Do you want me to give you what I call Dr. Bill Deagle end of the 21st century solution to the screening and so on? The first thing that has to happen, believe it or not, would be if we use the metapathia, which is developed by the Russian Space Agency under Dr. Nesterov, which I have here on my desk, and which I offer at our PPRDI facility in New York City with Jim Kersey, and we also have a Northern California facility that's getting ready to offer it. But that could, if it was in airports or in transfer points, you could actually see the harmonic resonance of the presence of the Zika virus, even if you can't even find the immunological markers. Then it needs to be followed up with what's called polymerase chain reaction analysis of different bodily fluids, because the problem is it may not be present in the blood, but it can be in the endocervix or it could be in the bone marrow. And this is something, so if the signature is there in terms of quantum harmonics, we need to actually start searching to where the hell the thing is. Has it gone to someone's brain? Is it in their bone marrow, so they're going to get a thrombocytopenia? The next thing that has to happen is we need to start giving what we call universal protection, especially to women, so they can't get this into their endoplasmic reticulum of their reproductive organs, like their uterine lining or their ovaries, because they're basically, once their ovaries are damaged, they can never have a normal pregnancy. And it's my guess that these stealth viruses will sit in there and wait until the woman tries to reproduce, and then if they try to produce a baby, because these are neurotropic, they're actually going to damage permanently the ability to have a normal child. So, one of the things I recommend is our Allison Med. We have our NutriSilver and Nutriodine. These all three will kill the pathogens, including intracellular. We also have things that will block the viral receptor binding domain for all RNA and DNA viruses, which is my special nutraceutical I developed years ago called NutriDefense. And it blocks all, not some, all RNA and DNA viruses that can't attach to the cell membrane, not only with blockers, but also with a thing called anhydrous polyphenol, which is the most powerful antioxidant in the world. So these things, if taken, just the NutriDefense and the Allison Med and either the Nutriodine or NutriSilver, would completely prevent women from getting infected. The problem is this is also going to infect men, and we don't know if it's an STD and lasts for months or years. We don't know if it migrates, if you have an immune deficiency syndrome like AIDS, or you're just elderly, if it goes to your brain and can cause a neurodegenerative disorder or eye disorder. So your divisions could start deteriorating because you've got Zika virus in the retina or in the cortex. And there's a lot of questions we haven't asked, but this is very serious. And the problem we also have to know is are there co-infections? Are there either filoviruses or other infections? When I started doing immunological testing years ago, what I discovered using Dr. Aristo Vujadani's lab in Beverly Hills that moved to LA years ago, and I started doing work with Aristo and Dr. Chung at UCLA 36 years ago on toxicology. These guys are brilliant. And when I measure their testing of people that have pathogens, and they think, well, I have cytomegalovirus or I have Incline Village, Nevada, I found the average person that was sick with, say, Lyme disease had 5 different pathogens, including viruses, both RNA and DNA, parasites, as well as Lyme disease or Lyme-like parasites. And there's 36 potential spirochetes in North America and North Europe. And most people, unless you're a specialist in infectious disease, which I am, you don't know what the heck you're dealing with, and you don't do testing. And if you don't test, you have no idea, including if you're an internist or family doctor or even an infectious disease. If you don't test, you don't know. And I test. And I've been testing for decades, and what I found out is I was woefully ignorant, that my training and teaching in residency was useless, and that when I actually tested in these advanced labs, which are federally certified, that we are woefully incapable of either identifying people that are sick, vectors that can be like a typhoid Mary, or the incidence of chronic infection that can target specific tissues that may not show up in the blood, even on the PCR test. So I believe that the metapathia screening and a universal effect to say, hey, we got an endemic area like in Miami, we need to make sure all these women are taking things so they never get infected. Because if they start to show the virus up, you can assume it's going to go to their remote sites where it can't be eliminated by your immune system, like the uterus, or the ovaries, or the brain, or the bone marrow, and it may persist there, and we have no idea unless you do testing. It's very advanced, like the metapathia. It looks at the harmonic resonance signature of these RNA filoviruses present in their body down to their target tissues. And the metapathia is capable of doing that. It'll actually pick up any pathogen and tell you if the signature is present. Pretty cool. It even tells you the target organ.
All right.
That's pretty amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. 4 universities will receive $10 million each for Zika research. The University of Florida, the University of Texas Medical Branch at Galveston, University of Wisconsin at Madison, and Cornell University in Ithaca, New York.
Well, these are good universities, but they're going to have a very narrow scope for their research. And because the research may be years before it's implemented in public practice, the providers, the clinicians, and the public health officials and the government, we call pinheads, that aren't necessarily going to collaborate this into a overall scheme. A lot of people are going to get permanently injured or sterilized or be incapable of having a normal child.
Yeah, that's called genetic.
Well, this is part of the scheme
genocide.
of the globalists to actually massively reduce world population. If people don't get this from Agenda 2030, and once in a while I'll have someone stupid enough to argue with me, and I do mean stupid enough, because to be honest, there's enough public information. You don't need to say Dr. Deagle's a conspiracy theorist. If you have the skills to read, you can look it up on the internet and in 5 minutes know that I'm not lying. That the globalists want to reduce the world population by 85 to 90%, and they're hell-bent on it with people like Leonardo DiCaprio and Igor, I call him Al Gore, and many other maniacs like George Soros. So I'm a real environmentalist, and these people are nuts, evil Satanists, and they will release bugs like that. You mentioned briefly that it may be only the tip of the iceberg when we look at anencephaly or microcephaly, that there may be brain defects in a large number of babies that the mother may have been transitorily infected with Zika virus. So the UPR response might have had some effects, or it may even persist and cause continuing neurodegenerative and eye conditions even after birth. So,
well, they don't know. They don't know if it's just the placenta. Now, this is a report that came out of a study they did in Brazil.
Right.
And she is out of Los Angeles, California.
Right.
And her co-authors are from Brazil and the United States. And so it's a legitimate report that was done, and they found that pregnancy losses or birth defects, 55% of pregnancy in which the infection occurred in the first trimester, 52% of the pregnancies in which the infection occurred in the second trimester, and 29% in which the infection occurred in the third trimester. Now, I'm quoting her now. I actually don't think there's...
What's her name again?
Nielsen Sains is her...
and she's in Los Angeles, but she's reporting research from Brazil, right?
Yes, and it was published in the New England Journal of Medicine.
Right, so we're going to have that when we pull up our videos. We'll have all that material available.
Yes, and her quote is, "I actually don't think there's anything more harmful to a fetus than Zika. It's probably the most teratogenic virus that exists." And teratogenic means, we talk about that with radiation damage from gamma rays.
Right.
And
so this is up there with gamma.
Yeah.
Wow.
It says the newborns may appear normal, but they might not be normal in 6 months. And sometimes, some of the pregnancies they were following, the women had had chikungunya, and they say that if you have another one of these flaviviruses, then it could make the Zika even worse. So it's going to have a profound impact on the cohort of infants delivered in the 9 months after the outbreak peak in each country. We haven't even reached the outbreak peak. So,
right.
You know, the thing is that we're way behind. We're so far behind. And what the World Health Organization has said, they said it's not a issue of international health concern. Every country will have to deal with it. Do you know how Indonesia...
That's an irrational statement, because if you look from space and you're in the space station, you can't see country borders. So this idea that each nation is going to handle this and we're not dealing with it as a global issue, it's the stupidity of people saying that nuclear proliferation is okay. You know, like the tweet this morning from Donald Trump. And by the way, nuclear proliferation for defense systems is good, and maybe putting 3 missiles back on the current systems, but the idea of nuclear proliferation is really bad. Because with the current, we mentioned this in the first hour with Matthew, my son, about the global apostasy toward materialism. This is dangerous no matter what your original geopolitical viewpoint, whether it's communism with Russia or materialism with the West and so on. It's a bad thing. It's a bad thing to say it's an individual national issue when really this is a global issue. And the problem isn't just Zika virus. We have to understand what was the platform that changed this virus from 1947. The research shows, and I went through this and put a video up earlier this year, and I'm going to redo it with a lot more data, that there's only 15 base pairs out of 10,000 changed in the genetics of Zika. So it went from being relatively bad to being something catastrophically horrifying. And that's only 15 base pairs, but I'm almost certain that the genetics is that the OXY513A gene upregulated for the free radical status in the host animals and people, and that's what caused the virus to mutate, because the research shows when you increase free radicals in the host, you can increase the level of mutation of RNA viruses to be more pathogenic, up to 10,000 times faster than DNA viruses. And this is exactly what they discovered in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, back when they were doing cyclotron research for developing superpathogens in the 1960s. By the way, the person that they claimed to be the assassin of John F. Kennedy was working in that project. We reviewed the book called Dr. Mary's Monkey, and people need to understand the bioweaponeers understood that when you blast someone with a cobalt-60 gamma burst, you increase the rate of mutation 10,000 times faster for RNA viruses than DNA to make them more deadly. Wow. Next story, which is remarkable, it's the molten iron jet stream 1,860 miles beneath the surface of the Earth. How did they discover this? Because obviously nobody's drilled that deep. But what did they discover to identify that there's this molten jet stream circling the solid core of the Earth?
Okay, do you see the ESA logo in the top left?
Yes, it's EE. It says E, and then it's got a little circle around with a little dot, and it says ESA. What does that stand for?
Well, the E with the circle around it with the dot is the logo.
Right.
And ESA stands for European Space Agency.
Ah, yeah.
And they sent up Swarm, what they did, and it was 3 satellites that they sent up there, and they were mapping the magnetic field of the Earth. And the iron, the molten iron river, they're calling it a jet stream, but that's just too confusing for me. Right. The molten iron river was detected below the North Pole by the Swarm satellites. It lies deep within the Earth's core. Now, we think that the Earth's core probably comes out to 2,000 miles, and so this goes down to the outer surface of the core.
Which is solid.
And except
well, we assume it's solid. Solid or solid crystalline is what they say. Some form of, because it's super compressed, so it's very likely in some alternative, we call matter state. In other words, it's under such high heat and compression, it's probably not solid like we think on the surface. It's much more crystalline in a sense.
It is as wide as the UK, and it is caused by liquid in the core squeezing around a boundary, and they don't tell us about the boundary. And they say that this river is accelerating, and it could change direction. Anyway, right now it's heading towards Canada. And so it's underneath the earth, about 2,000 miles. And they found that the position of this river of molten iron aligns with a boundary between two different regions in the Earth's core. I didn't know the Earth's core had two different regions. Okay.
Right.
So this is, I am learning so much here. But this protective field extends thousands of miles into space, and its magnetism, of course, affects everything from global communication to animal migration to weather patterns.
You're a ham radio operator. This is what allows you ham radio. It also generates the Van Allen radiation belt that has 5 layers, so maybe you can expand on that.
Well, let me finish with this article. Yeah. We can explain it as an accelerating band of molten iron circling the North Pole.
Wow.
And they found changes in the magnetic field indicating that the iron in the outer core, so you have an outer core and an inner core, was moving faster in the northern hemisphere, mostly under Alaska and Siberia. It is moving at more than 25 miles per year. Now, that is 3 times faster than the typical core speeds and hundreds of thousands of times faster than the speed at which Earth's tectonic plates move. They move in millimeters per year.
Right.
This is moving at 25 miles per year, which means that it's dragging the edges of the tectonic plates. And
okay, that makes sense.
And they think that it could be provided by buoyancy or changes in the magnetic field. So Swarm was 3 satellites, 3 identical satellites, and the data from the satellites being processed by the British Geological Survey, and the satellites orbit in a unique configuration. So 2 satellites fly at a height of 280 miles, and the 3rd satellite will fly at an altitude of 330 miles. So there's 2 that are down lower and 1 that is higher, and that's so that they can get more precise measurements of the magnetic field.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So that just changes our whole idea of plate dynamics, of tectonic plate dynamics, and our understanding of the movement of the core in the center of the Earth, because this is a movement of core materials that is moving towards Alaska and Canada, and it probably has implications. That's probably why we saw the magnetic north pole move from Canada, Alaska to Siberia.
Right.
And there was a crash.
Right.
There was a Russian military plane crash very close to the new location of the magnetic North Pole. And 32 people were injured. And they said that they didn't know the cause of the crash, but they said it could be a technical malfunction. Well, I think you know this, but I think pilots are told, when they do their training, they're told not to fly near the North Pole, North Magnetic Pole, because it disrupts the instrumentation on their planes.
Right.
Yeah, so I think that's what happened. If you look at the picture there, and we can do that on live stream,
right,
you can see where the little white stars are. That's the migration of right in almost the center of the picture. There's little 4-sided stars, and
right,
that's the migration of the magnetic North Pole.
Right. We know from Dr. Bob Dennis and NASA that the polar magnetic flux field, the Schumann resonance, stimulates stem cells. We know the specific frequencies. It's my suspicion that that's what scrambles their altitude and their GPS coordinates guidance systems. And they probably were in some bad weather where they wouldn't know whether they're up or down or sideways, and that's what probably caused the crash. That you're right, it probably disrupted their guidance systems on the aircraft, and maybe even disrupted their magnetic controls of if they're fly-by-wire, maybe it screwed up their ability to control the airfoils that actually fly the plane.
Well, when I talk to people, and I try to explain to them, because they people, they go through Boy Scouts, and they learn declination. And here in St. Louis, the declination was 11 right. degrees. Now it's -2 degrees. So instead of turning it to the right, you have to back it up 2 degrees. And but people don't relearn that kind of information. And so, when you're in a manager position, you're just not going to believe some trainee that's trying to tell you that the declination is now -2, because you learned it was 11 here in St. Louis.
Right, but it's actually moved, though. Is what you're saying.
And I just wonder if Russia has kept up. Even if, let's say, the astrophysicists have kept up with the movement of the magnetic North Pole, that might not make its way down into airport operations.
Right. The number you're saying is they may have old training that did allow them not able to use it for proper navigation, for example, at the very least.
Right. Well, they might not even know there's... when the magnetic North Pole was close to Canada, Alaska, there weren't any airports up there. So, we didn't even think about airports. But now that it's over in Siberia, there are airports close to it, as you can see from that map.
Now, I'll raise a couple of questions and a couple of interesting kind of parallels. The Hadron Collider that's 20-some miles long in the border between Switzerland and France is very similar to what you're talking about here in terms of what's going on inside the Earth. What you have is what's called a torsion field generator. Now, the way it's generated is you create a plasma because you have nuclear isotopes that generate free electrons, so you have what's called a plasma field. And that plasma field starts to distort what's called a Higgs boson field, which means you literally have a time-space warp or a wave in time-space that actually starts to cause a movement of the ion fields of metals. Metals, of course, in this liquid phase are, in a sense, a paracrystalline liquid. For example, most people don't realize that things like concrete are paracrystalline liquid. It's not a solid, actually, technically. It's a liquid. But when you get in these plasma states, you get states of matter that are very different. So this field of molten iron is actually in the form of plasma, and it's moving through what's called a torsion field. The torsion field actually is what generates the magnetosphere of the Earth and the Van Allen radiation belt, and it's what the Hadron Collider is trying to do by creating torsion field wormholes so they can do intergalactic travel. They want to actually create wormholes or map out the existing wormholes in the galaxy, the superhighways in the galaxy, so they know where to hop on the torsion field to actually jump to another part of the galaxy. You know that's what they're up to, right?
Well, it seems, I watched the movie Angels and Demons,
right.
Demons and Angels, and I recommend everybody watch that because they talk about the experiments that are going on in CERN.
Right. And you're talking about on the astral or spiritual side, because what they're doing is opening up what's called hyperspace. And our soul exists actually in hyperspace or higher dimensional planes. But what they're doing is they're actually able to jump past the speed of light through these torsion field wormholes. Now, all the inner planets actually are nuclear reactors. Jupiter, Earth, Saturn, these are basically, they're all the inner planets, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, they're all nuclear reactors. And they create a magnetosphere around them by these torsion field generators. And the reason is because the nuclear isotopes create what's called a plasma field. The plasma field is what gives our Earth protection so that life could exist on the surface, because without this torsion field and the nuclear protection by creating this magnetosphere around Earth and the ionosphere that we oxidize even incoming ultraviolet light, life wouldn't exist on the planet. We wouldn't have bacteria, cockroaches, people, or animals. So we have this kind of protective layer that protects us. Now, the magnetosphere of the Earth has been dropping. Since the Babylonian times, our current magnetosphere that protects life on Earth has dropped 30-fold. Most people aren't aware of that. They don't realize that it's dropped that much just since Babylonian times 3,000 years ago. And we're through a cycle, and what happens is these cycles also are tied directly to what's called a lithospheric disjunction, where the actual crust on the Earth moves very rapidly for a period of maybe months over the mantle of the Earth, because it's like a skin of a peach that's been steamed, and that skin of that peach can slide on the mantle or the actual body of the peach. Now, there's different forces. Those forces are deep in the Earth, with this torsion field generating the movement of these molten core, but it also has effects on what's called the ringwoodite, which is the rock deep in the mantle that releases nascent oxygen and hydrogen in combination with gravity waves from deep space, which is why the globalists are fully aware of the Atacama Large Millimeter Array and the fact that we have this Death Star, you want to call them, like the Star Wars. The Death Star is actually not a manufactured entity. It's actually a dwarf star, a red dwarf, that's repeating after 20-some thousand years a return in a hyperelliptical orbit to our Oort cloud. And its gravitational waves can release nascent oxygen and hydrogen, which are the primary driver for earthquakes and volcanoes. Earthquakes and volcanoes happen in these long cycles, and they're also accompanied by lithospheric slips, which means the actual crust of the Earth can move on the mantle. For example, 8 million years ago, Alaska was on the equator. Isn't that interesting? Alaska.
Well, yeah, we had mastodons in Wyoming.
Right, and people have to understand, if you actually see the re-emergence of pyramids in Antarctica, because there's articles out about it now in National Geographic and elsewhere, the reason is that the ancient mapped by Amerigo Vespucci, that actually get maps going back to the 1500s and before, back to Babylonian and in pre-Babylonian times, in ancient Sumer and Egypt, they actually mapped out Antarctica as a continent that existed with people and animals on it. So Antarctica was always at the South Pole, and certainly wasn't in a position where it was covered by massive ice and volcanic mountains like Mount Erebus. So what we're dealing with is the actual positions of the continents and the islands and so on over billions or hundreds of millions of years is considerably different than what we think. It even talks about that in the Bible, about Pangaea, which is a supercontinent that broke up.
Okay, Dr. Deagle, I want to get back to this groundbreaking experiment that CERN did.
Yeah, let's go ahead and let's do that.
Where they isolated antimatter. Now, I've always been... Yes, they have... They actually had a vial or whatever they contained it with, and they used the laser, and so that, they're very close to answering one of the great riddles of the universe. So we're talking, as it turns out, this was antimatter. Is a mirror of ordinary matter, and when matter and antimatter annihilate each other, right, they make gamma rays. So this ties into a study that was being done by NASA. NASA was looking at thunderstorms. Right. Now, I had always been told that lightning was caused by static electricity. That right. is negative ions rushing to attach to positive ions, and that was what caused lightning. That was all wrong. That was all wrong. What they did a study, and you have to look at this video.
Yeah,
it's on the. You need to just pull it up from. I always put in the link, and right. What they found was that there were gamma rays in the megaelectron volt range. So it was like a ball of gamma rays that were going out from the center of the collision. Well, you only get gamma rays from radioactive materials, or when matter and antimatter join. When they annihilate each other, you
right.
get a gamma ray, and in the megaelectron volt. So all this time, when we would look at the lightning strikes and we say, "Oh, how beautiful," we were being dosed with gamma rays. So,
wow.
So
what was happening is that there was a production of antimatter, and the interaction of antimatter created the lightning itself. So lightning is actually a result of matter and antimatter meeting.
Yeah, well, we don't. That's the question. It's where thunderstorms, the clouds go up above 50,000 feet. They're way above the jet stream, and some of them go up to 80,000 feet. So I guess the question is, is there antimatter up there at that altitude?
Well, let me tell you the sequence of events that happens when a lightning strike occurs. From my lightning expert buddies I've talked to, the first strike is actually not from the clouds, but the ground to the cloud. So there's a plasma discharge from the ground to the cloud, or the where the cloud center is, the ionosphere. And then there's a counterstrike down toward the ground. And it may actually not be on the same pathway. So there's obviously a plasma discharge that occurs, but that plasma discharge, maybe that's the thing that generates the antimatter, and that the actual lightning strike itself, as this process gets going, generates the antimatter that creates the gamma burst. But the first strike is actually ground to sky. Isn't that interesting?
Well, that's what you've been told.
Yeah, well, that's what I've been told. It fits with, but there are a lot of questions. That's pretty cool stuff. Back in a moment with more with Ann Morrison. We'll cover more on the videos. Back to touch on another.
Well, I just want, I am just so astonished that it's taken us this long to understand that antimatter is not something that is very remote or doesn't occur except in black holes, but it's occurring in our own atmosphere.
Wow.
And it's just astonishing to me that, well, I'm just so thankful that NASA has released this video, which is very good. But, of course, that what they say is that all the gamma rays go out into space. Well, that's hard for me to swallow, because I know that gamma rays will be transmitted in any direction they want to be transmitted.
I can't see that it would be unidirectional. It doesn't make sense to me.
No. Okay, I did have, let's see, we have scientists and that are scrambling to protect research on climate change, because the top people that are going to be helping Trump, and that's going to be the Secretary of Defense is a retired general, and the Homeland Security is a retired general, and the current chairman of the whatever they call it is a general. And none of them believe that climate change should be under the purview of NASA. So they're attempting to download and save as much data as possible before the Trump administration could seek to wipe out government websites as harder and grease. We paid for this research. You wouldn't think they would wipe it out.
That's wrong-headed, and here's the problem that I see. You don't want to have basically what I call a totalitarian regime basically says we're going to say that climate change isn't due to humans, therefore we're going to wipe out all the scientists to find out what the hell causes it. Here are the drivers that I know about. Mount Erebus in Antarctica generates every day from its volcanic release, just that one volcano, 10,000 times more so-called greenhouse gases, nitric oxide, and other toxins than all the coal-fired generators on the planet. The fact is, the human influence is primarily things like nuclear reactors that release radioisotopes that can affect the ozone layer and can cause pollutions that destroy our cities. And there's local climate increases, but to take away the power of NASA being one of the inputs is not a wise thing to do. I think we need to expand and analyze other drivers as to what is causing it, galactic and solar space weather, for example. But the idea of going completely in the other direction is wrong-headed. So, thank you, Ann. We're going to do a video after the program with updates on this and many other topics. You do an amazing job. I really appreciate everybody supporting you by donations. We will be back after the program to do an update on video on live stream. And joining us is the host for Hour 3, the Wellness Hour of firing line. I'm in the firing line. The batter cage is